I'll give you a seaplane welcome. Welcome to Pensacola. Weather is almost perfect, and you won't find any better people in the whole USA. So that's from the play Seaplane. Well, my name's Quinn Studer, and I'm very excited to have you here. I'm going to go real quick and turn over to Kevin Robbins, who's going to introduce our guest. I'm very excited, just a little how Lisa got here. I've done a lot of work over the years with the University of Alabama Birmingham Medical School. A fellow named Dr. Rodney Tucker. And he sort of has tracked what we've been doing with the CivicCon. It's sort of cool. In fact, this Monday, Chuck Marone, who did a great job last time, just a couple weeks ago, was in Stillwater. So they're sort of doing CivicCon. Lafayette's doing a CivicCon now, which is really trying to just raise the civic IQ. What are some best practices? What we can learn so we can have conversations. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but we can have conversations about certain topics that sometimes people aren't comfortable talking about. But it's only by talking about those topics will we ever become comfortable talking about those topics. So Rodney Tucker called me and said, you really should bring Lisa McNair to Pensacola. I see what you're doing. And I called Lisa, and we talked, and we've got her here, and we're just thrilled that she's here, and Kevin will tell you more about her. She's been really busy. She came in, and yesterday she was at Greater Little Rock Baptist Church with Dr. Lonnie Wesley talking. And then we offered her to both school districts, and we're really pleased. Santa Rosa stepped up right away, school district, and we have the superintendent of schools here, Karen Barber. So there we go. Her and the school board moved real quickly and took advantage of having somebody like Lisa here. And she spoke today in I think at Milton High School, if I'm not mistaken. And I got this note already from Clark Youngblood, who's the coordinator of social studies from the Santa Rosa School District. This was to Terry Horn. Mr. Horn, thank you for reaching out to our district and providing us the opportunity to hear Ms. McNair's story. The positive message she delivers and the lessons that can be learned from this event and how her family took this tragedy and made a message of hope. I visited with teachers in their classrooms after they returned. They were excited, and their students were having a great discussion. Again, thank CivicCon for providing this experience. So again, thank you very much. Let's give it up for the best dressed reporter for the Pensacola News Journal, Kevin Robbins.
Thank you, sir. So Lisa McNair is a Birmingham native, and she is the younger sister of Denise McNair, one of the 4 girls killed in the infamous 1963 bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. She was raised in Birmingham and attended public and private schools and attended college at the University of Alabama, and both in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham. She worked 18 years at the Greater Birmingham Convention and Visitors Bureau promoting tourism and was instrumental in helping to develop civil rights historic tours in the Greater Birmingham area. Later, she spent 7 years working full-time in her family's business, Chris McNair Studios and Art Gallery. She is a national public speaker who runs her own business, Speak Lisa, where she shares stories of Denise's life, her heinous murder, how it affected her parents in the city of Birmingham. She speaks on racial unity and how we all must remember that as human beings, we have more things in common than things that make us different. As part of the work she does, she conducts anti-racism workshops. She is also a professional photographer with her business, Posh Photographers. And she hopes that the lessons we've learned from the civil rights movements will help us honor the lives that have been lost and prevent us from repeating those same tragedies. So everyone, please welcome Lisa to the stage.
Well, good evening, everybody. How y'all doing? This is so interesting being on stage every time. It's always wild. So today what I'm going to do is share with you a little information about my family and the loss that we suffered. And then I'm going to share some things that you might not know. Have a little words of wisdom, I guess that's what you call it. And then we're gonna open the floor, and then I think you have questions, and Lisa's gonna do a Q&A session because I want to know what you guys want to know. So this is a picture of my sister Denise. This is my father's favorite picture of her. He shot it of her shortly before she was killed with his little brownie, her little brownie camera, and he didn't think that the picture would turn out good, but he didn't develop it until after she died, and he found out it was quite a jewel. On that day that she was killed, there were 4 girls killed on that day. Carol Robertson, Addie Mae Collins, and Cynthia Morris Wesley. They were 14 years old and just starting their freshman year in high school. This is the picture of Denise standing in our yard, and I want to tell you this about the pictures. 95% of the pictures are pictures that my dad took. My dad was a professional photographer, and so we have pictures of everything. And so it's been a real good resource for my PowerPoint. But this picture is a picture of her in our front yard with our dog Whitey, and we are dog people, bless you. And Whitey, and so this is one of the pictures, and I just love this picture of her. Denise was the only child at the time. She was 11 when she was killed. My parents had tried to have other children the whole 11 years that she lived, but my mother had trouble carrying to term. And so you can imagine losing your child at church when you take it to church, but maybe not ever being able to have any other children was just devastating. But people prayed and they had hoped, and almost exactly a year to the day that she was killed, I was born. Then 4 years later, and my mother was 40, my younger sister Kim was born. Kim is a professional chef with Biddy's Living Kitchen. You can Instagram her, follow her on Instagram. And so she's a professional chef. She does a lot of holistic and pharmacy lines with healthy and holistic items, and she's very good, and I'm very proud of her. This image is a picture of the church on the day that it was bombed. You can see it created a crater right here. There was such a terribly strong bomb. Then back here across the street, there was a building, and all the windows were blown out. You can't see the cars, but the cars that were next to the buildings were totally destroyed. People have told me that were near the church, that were in Birmingham on that day, they weren't even near the church. They were miles away, and they could feel the impact of that bomb. This picture you may have seen in history. You may call it history, but I call it family. This is my grandmother, Clara. This is my cousin, Lynn. You see the back of her head. This is my Aunt Juanita, Lynn's mom, and this is my mom, and my Aunt Juanita is trying to console her. This picture is inset is a picture of my cousin, Lynn, and my sister, Denise. Lynn and Denise were first cousins. They went everywhere together. They loved each other to death. But Lynn didn't go to church that Sunday because Auntie Nene had a newborn baby who was sick. So she had decided that she wasn't going to take her family to church on that day. If she had taken her family to church that day, we would have had 2 people in our family to be murdered. This is the brick that when my dad and mama went to identify Denise in the morgue, they found in her forehead. And they feel like that's the brick that killed her. When I was in my teenage years, my grandmother, we were all at her house, and she pulled out this box. And I guess funeral homes and that kind of situation give you a box of the personal effects of the items of the person that died. So there was her purse and things in the purse, her shoes, and that brick. And to this day, I don't know why they included that brick, but I value that brick now because this really lets you know that someone died, and this is a piece of how hate can kill someone. So we have that brick. We have all of her items on loan to the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and we deliberately put them on loan. So we decide we want to get our stuff back. We can get them back if they start acting wrong and we don't trust them anymore. But it travels. So different cities or museums can have this exhibit to travel and see all her toys and different things that belong to her. This is Sarah Collins Rudolph. You don't hear much about Sarah Collins Rudolph. She was actually the sole survivor of the bombing. She was the 5th girl in the bathroom that day. So she was standing just far enough away from the girls that she was not killed. But as you see, her eyes are bandaged, and this left eye is not good, but her right eye she lost entirely. But she lives, and she lives in Birmingham, and I see her all the time. She travels and does speaking engagements like I do, and she has a book called The 5th Little Girl that tells about her story. And we were speaking to a tour group that came a few weeks ago. And so somehow we speak to that group every time it comes every year. And often when we're traveling out of the city, we end up speaking together. So I've heard her tell her story a number of times. And this particular time, one of the students in the Q&A asked her, how was it going back to high school after the bombing? She said it was terrible. It was just awful. Kids teased her because she wore a patch over her eye and made fun of her. But what she told me next almost sent me to the floor. She said she had shards of glass in her face from the bombing, and they weren't able to get them all out while she was at the hospital. So over time, they would inch their way out, and her sister had to keep a pair of tweezers so that she could pull them out of her face. I almost passed out, because that was just more than I could take. But can you imagine somebody making fun of a child at school who went through that? It's just ridiculous. This picture is a picture of the funeral, the day of the funeral. So Dr. King and several of the ministers from the SCLC came to Birmingham the Monday right after the funeral to meet with the families and see if they wanted to have a mass funeral. Mrs. Robertson had already prepared Carol's funeral, and she didn't want to change, and they honored her request. So they got the other 3 families, the McNair, the Collins, and the Wesley family, to have a mass funeral, and Dr. King did the eulogy. If you have not heard the eulogy, I didn't know when I was a little kid that you could listen to the eulogy, but the same tour group that brings these kids, the guy that leads it, plays the eulogy in 16th Street Church. So I've heard it. It's 7 minutes. It's fabulous. You wouldn't think anything could be well said and done for such a tragic thing, but Dr. King was an amazing orator. So you can Google it and pull it up, and I highly advise you to listen to it. It's very well done. But what's interesting is get the written part as well, because the typed up part that he typed up in his original notes are not all the words that he said originally. We don't know why he didn't say them, but it's very interesting. So the picture on the left is a picture of my parents. You can see them coming down the steps behind the casket of Denise. And over here is a picture where my mother passed out at the cemetery because the death and the burial of her child was just too much. And this is Mom and Dad, and on the left is a picture of them shortly after Denise was killed, and then on the right is a picture of them on Mama's 90th birthday. And we took her to get seafood, which is her favorite thing, so we let her have all the shrimp that she could consume. She passed away on the 2nd of January, so that's really new and really fresh. And I have not made it through any of these speaking engagements without getting a little emotional, because they were great. You know, some people say their parents are great, but my parents really were great. They were wonderful. They taught us a lot of love and a lot of fun. And my mom was a teacher, so she was always teaching us and introducing us to things. And she loved to cook as well, like my sister. So, you know, every year we learned about a new food. I never forget the year that we learned about quiche. That was just wonderful, and it was delicious. And so she just made quiche all summer. Once she figured out to make something, she'd make it to death. And then she also would introduce us to new foods like kumquats. These are kumquats, and you need to know what they are. And then the vegetable man would come. I don't know about y'all, but we had a little man that would drive a little truck in the country, and he would bring you vegetables. and fruits and stuff. And so she had sugar cane. And she said, this is sugar cane. And this is what we had. We didn't have candy. We just chewed on this. And that was our candy when we were growing up. She was just fabulous. And then Daddy just taught us to think. Always be paying attention. Always be watching out what's going on. He said that you should always be thinking. And then another thing he would say was that somebody has always got to be in charge. And so when he got older and I was that person in charge, he really didn't like that he told me that. Because I had put it back on him, I said, now don't you remember you told us one day that somebody always had to be in charge? Well, I'm so very sorry, but today that is me. But another thing that they taught us was to love. They taught us to love and not hate. And you can imagine that people who'd been through what they'd been through could have just been horrible people. They could have been angry and bitter, but they chose not to do that. Their walk and their faith helped them to choose not to do that. But I also think in part, my daddy was a big part of that because he didn't go to church where Mama went to church. He went to a small Lutheran church called St. Paul Lutheran Church that had an all-black membership except for 5 people. The pastor, his wife, and 3 kids. They were white. And that gave us the wonderful opportunity to spend time with the Elwangers as friends and to learn that all white people didn't mean us any harm. And some of them could be our friend and loved us. And this is also a picture of them in front of the little church where my daddy belonged. And then this is my blessing or christening or whatever you want to call it. And when I was little, this Pastor Elwanger and his wife, very much with child, and my dad's mother. And so I've been blessed in the Lutheran church, baptized in the Baptist church, and went 8 years to private elementary school at the Episcopalian church school. So I'm covered, y'all, all the way around. I'm going straight to heaven, okay? And the Elwangers are still our friends. They're in the 80s. They're 80s. They live in Wisconsin. And the wife recently, during some of the protest march, just were protesting, and she got arrested. So she is still in the fight, y'all. My daddy believed that public service was a great way to honor Denise. So in 1973, he became the first black legislator to be elected in Jefferson County, and that's where we lived. And he was elected in a district that was not all predominantly white. So I think that said a lot about him, and people really loved him. He could connect with just about anybody. And we would go to the store and grocery store, and we would just be there forever because he always had to talk to all the people, and they had to talk to him. But he loved people. He genuinely loved meeting people, getting to know people, and spending time with people. And he was just awesome. This is a picture of us at the swearing in, Mama with those cat-eye glasses. I thought they were so fabulous. When I got grown, I found them and put my lenses in them. Daddy, my sister Kim, and me. The bombers for that created the bomb and killed the girls were not immediately brought to justice. And I remember telling my mom, was like, when I figured out that nobody had said anything about anybody going to jail, I said, well, Mama, whatever happened to the people who killed Denise? She said, well, we don't really know. And I said, well, you don't really know. I was like, well, but you're supposed to know. You know, if they killed people, they're supposed to go to jail. And she was like, well, that's not how it works for us. But we're just going to lean on the Lord and let God be our vindicator. I was thinking, no, because on TV, when somebody kills somebody, they go to jail. And but she said that's just the way it was for us. And so it was not till 1977 did Bob Chambliss was convicted of the murder of just Denise by this man here, Attorney General Bill Baxley, who was smart and clever enough to only bring that one guy to justice for the death of Denise so that double jeopardy would not set in case he got off. And so he's awesome. In 1997, Spike Lee did the documentary Four Little Girls. Has anybody seen that documentary? A few people. Well, if you haven't, I'd like to ask you to do me a personal favor to go find it and watch it and view it. It is a wonderful documentary that Spike did that tells about the lives of the four girls, their families, and what life was like in Birmingham at that time. Yeah, I've seen it on HBO Max because it was an HBO film, Amazon Prime, and Netflix. But I heard that it's also on YouTube to be watched. When Spike did the documentary, in the documentary, it talks about Dynamite Bob being convicted, but it also mentions the other guys. And people were like, well, what about them? Are they not going to ever arrest them and bring them to justice? And I think the chatter around that got back to the FBI, and the FBI later opened the case, and the last two killers who were still alive were convicted in 2001 and 2002. Justice was delayed, but it was not denied. And they were brought to justice by Doug Jones and his fabulous, wonderful prosecution team. In 2013, at the 50th anniversary of the bombing, the four girls, they were posthumously given the Congressional Gold Medal. And this is a medal that is the highest medal that a citizen can be given from Congress. And what I like that was really cool is two of our Congress people got together and wrote the bill. Terry Sewell, who happens to be a Democrat and a woman and black, and Spencer Backus, who was white, a Republican, and a male. And they came together and wrote the bill. And they brought the bill to the House and to the Senate, and both houses of Congress voted the bill unanimously. So I know, hallelujah. Can we see more of that? Yes. And so that gave us the wonderful opportunity, once the bill was passed, to see the president sign the bill. So Mama and I got to go to Washington, D.C. to meet President Obama in the White House and see him sign the bill. And it was a wonderful experience. It's still surreal. I still can't believe we actually did it. I have to pinch myself when I'm reminding of it. Mama had Alzheimer's, but for years she remembered that President Obama kissed her on the cheek. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. This image on the right is a picture of the Wales window. And the scripture down at the bottom, I have to get a better picture next time, is from do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And this picture depicts the fact that the bombing didn't just happen in Birmingham and affect the people in Birmingham or in Alabama or in the United States. The people of Wales, all the way over across the pond, decided that they wanted to do something to honor the girls. And they individually gathered up dimes and pennies and dollars and raised money. Not the monarchy, not the government, but individuals. They found an artist and had him to do this rendering. And a year and a half later, they brought this stained glass window to Alabama and had it installed in the church. So the picture on the right is of me and Mama and the pastor at that time, Reverend Cross, during the day that they did the installation of the church at 16th Street Baptist Church. So that just makes me think about how powerful that whole experience was and life-changing for the world. It made people stand up and really take notice of how bad things were, but how hard we need to work to go forward to show love and kindness. This is a picture of Denise. And Denise is giving a muscular dystrophy fair in her yard for kids with muscular dystrophy. So this is Denise, and this is her cousin Lynn, and our neighbor Barbara. And they're in our front yard giving this fair. And I thought that was so cool of her as a little kid because, you know, I didn't get to know her either. I'm learning who she is like you all are learning who she is, you know. And this lets me know that she was an awesome, awesome person and would have been a great, great adult. So these words on the side are words that were taken from her funeral program. And it says, Denise showed great leadership ability and loved to be associated with children. She was also fond of helping others. And so that tells you a little bit about who Denise was. This image I took of the four spirit statues. I shot it from the back of it simply because I like the fact that the church could be seen. This is the statues that were erected to the girls because they realized that there was no good memorial to them, tangible memorial to them. And so they did that in 2013 also at the 50th anniversary of the bombing. And so you see the girl here, this is Denise being depicted here. And she's standing up here and she's holding 6 doves. So 4 of the doves, 1 for each of the 4 girls. But the other 2 are for Johnny Robinson and Virgil Ware. What a lot of people don't know is that on that day, 2 other little children who were boys were brutally murdered for no reason other than they were black on that day. So we honor them as well. Then you see this girl here. This is to be Addie Mae Collins, and she's tying the sash on the dress. Well, Sarah Collins, the 5th girl, said that was the last thing she remembered before the bomb hit. She came around the corner and she heard Denise ask Addie if she would tie the sash on her dress. And Addie bent down to tie the sash on her dress, and she said that was the last thing she saw before the bomb exploded. So where do we go from here? This is my favorite picture of Denise because she has on yellow, and yellow's her favorite color. And usually I wear yellow, but I think I had on yellow this morning, so I'll have yellow on today. But I just think she's just such a pretty little child, and I wish I had gotten to know her. It will be 60 years that she was killed on next year. And I think 60 years is long enough for us to have racism, and we need to really kick ourselves up to work harder to get rid of it. I think when you see somebody say racist things, we can no longer close our eyes and not speak out. We have to share and share our story. We have to share what's going on with us. As African Americans in the audience, we have the opportunity now, we live near white people, we work near white people, but we tend not to share our story because we don't want anybody to feel bad. But it's time to stop doing that and share your story with others. And we have white people here, and if you know it and you get it, then it's time for you to share it with other white people. Only you can share what you know and how you came to know what is right with someone else. And this will be the only way we can eradicate this hate that goes in our country. Dr. King's principles of nonviolence, this is one of them. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice and not people. So we want to defeat the injustice, but we don't want to defeat the people. We want to do these things and say these things with love and kindness and encouragement and hope. And there's not always an opportunity for us to do it over and for us to wait. Denise died. And if somebody had done that maybe before, maybe she wouldn't have died. This is her headstone. And the words on the headstone say, she loved all, but a mad bomber hated her kind. And we will be much better off for having done this work that we need to do. So I want to tell you all a little story. So I told you about my dad becoming a public figure and going in the legislature, so he did that. He was reelected a number of times in his position there. And then later on, he decided, I want to be a county commissioner. So I didn't know what the heck that was. It was like, really, one more thing to remember who to vote for and what, And what does the county commissioner do? I guess they run the county. But that was just never on my radar. I knew mayor, legislator, congressman, senator, and really? So, but it was a full-time job, and he had an office and staff. My mother was thrilled because my dad was a professional photographer. He worked for himself, and he never made a dime, and he was always broke. And my mama, as a school teacher, had to carry the load all the time. So she was thrilled. Her man was finally going to get a job and she could get some living room furniture. And so he went up to that job, and when he got that job, he decided to remodel the house. And when he remodeled the house, he was born in a small town in Arkansas called Fordyce, Arkansas. And I remember my first visit there to visit my grandparents. They had an outhouse, and Mama was traumatized by that, and so was I. Well, obviously, Daddy must have been for life, because when he remodeled the house, we have 6 bathrooms in our house. There's no line and no waiting when you come to the McNair house. If you got to go, you can go all day. So because of that, there's always a plumbing issue. So one of the guys who worked under him at the county, was this white guy named Dennis. And he was a good old boy, and he was the master plumber. And he was just delightful. He was so much fun. So Daddy would hire him after hours to come and fix whatever problem we had in one of the many toilets and bathrooms. And I used to hang out with him, and I'd let him in the house, and we'd talk and chat, and we always had a lovely time because he was so delightful and so funny. And my sister went to Auburn, and I went to Alabama. So Dennis was a huge Auburn fan. I mean, huge. And so he would come and he would always say, well, I like you. You're a nice person and everything, but your sister is better because she knows what college to go to. You don't. And so I would follow him around like a little puppy, and I'd watch him fix whatever was wrong, because I was kind of interested in plumbing. I don't know if I was so much interested in plumbing because it was fascinating and I like to take things apart and pull them back together again, as I was like, dang, we got to call him and pay him again to come and fix one more thing. Let me watch some of this so I can figure out not to have to call Dennis again. But it was so much fun to call him and him to come, so I didn't really mind us having to pay for that. And so one time afterwards, I would walk into the door and we'd always chat and have a great time. And this particular time, he sat down and had a little talk with me, and he said, I love your dad. Your dad is a great man. He is a good person. I was like, thank you, Dennis. That's so nice. And I love him and your mom and everybody. And I just think y'all are great people. I was like, well, thank you. And he said, but I didn't always like black people. In fact, I was raised to hate black people. That's what my parents taught me to do. And he said, I even had some Klan affiliation. But when I met your dad, and he was so real, and he was so nice, he said, I had to change the way I thought about that and turn that all the way around. And he said, and I love him, and he is a great man. And I said, well, thank you, Dennis. I think that is wonderful. But what you don't know, that Dennis didn't just turn that around for himself. It was like dropping a pebble in water. His wife changed the way she thought. His children changed the way they thought. His son-in-laws to his daughters changed the way they thought. And we have this whole group of people that we would never have known or been a part of had Dennis not turned that corner in his head, who are now our friends. My sister opened a restaurant a couple of years ago, and anytime we do anything publicly, Dennis's son-in-law and daughter are in the front row. They're the first people to be there to support us. His daughter, who lived out west, would call my daddy on the phone all the time. She wouldn't call her daddy and complain about life. She would call my daddy and complain about life. And so they would talk for hours on the phone and share. And Dennis and I became best buds, me and an older white man just talking and hanging out and going to have lunch together. It was just the weirdest thing. But he was fun, and he was delightful. And that was a beautiful part of my life. And I never forget that Daddy told me, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, that I was talking to his daughter, and she said, your dad was great, and he really was good to me. And said, when my mother was dying, I was talking on the phone with him, and I was so sad that I couldn't afford to fly back from California to be with my mom and bring my kids before she passed away. And Daddy hung up the phone and made some calls. And he called her back and he said, "Now I want you to go to the airport and pick up those tickets. I got tickets for you and your kids so you can see Obama before she leaves us." That's what life is all about, y'all. We all gonna live, we're all gonna die, we're all gonna have sorrow, we're all gonna have pain, and we're there for each other. So can we not be there for each other all of the time? So fast forward, Dennis later on got sick, and he fought a good fight, but my friend died. And I think I was the only black person at his funeral. He was the only person I had ever known to be buried in full Auburn regalia. But I miss him so much. He was just a delightful part of my life. But I'm so glad that he turned the recording in his head so that we could be friends and we could be family together. Because after all, we all are the United States of America. Emphasis on the word united. So I have one more slide, and I think I put it in the wrong place, so we're going to jump forward to it. I do have a book that's going to come out in September. Finally, I've wanted to write this book since I was 14, and at 57, it's finally going to come out. It's called Dear Denise, Letters to the Sister I Never Knew. So you all can look for that in September. And I just wanted to share that with y'all. I thank you for listening to me today. And Lisa, if you want to come up. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And I know you had another presentation. This is live streamed, but you had another presentation at a church yesterday that was live streamed as well. And Kevin will make sure he includes that in his story so everyone can listen to that. I think it was a little different. I wanted to go back and touch on a couple of the themes that you talked about. You said your mom, she taught you how to love. She taught you how to have fun. How do you do that? How do you have fun yourself and teach someone else to have fun? How do you still have love and teach someone else how to have love after what happened?
You know, I think that's the, am I on? Okay. I think that's the beautiful thing, about the black people, at least all the black people I know. I mean, we just keep going. I mean, you think about for how many years we've been oppressed and been beat down. I mean, we could just wallow in it all day. Well, what would that solve? So we just pick ourselves up, put our boots on, and keep on going another day. And she had 2 more kids to raise. She couldn't raise them with a cloud over them. She had to just take us to piano lesson, take us to ballet class, help us with our homework, make us remember to feed the dog and, make our beds up every day and just live.
From everything I've heard you say tonight and everything I've heard about your family, that love is pretty unconditional. It's for everyone. It's not just relegated to people who look just like you. I mean, that's a hard one for me. So how did you make that hurdle? And for your parents, did it take a while? Was it pretty instantaneous because that's just who they were inside?
It just was instantaneous. Now, I don't remember Mama having a lot of white friends because she went to school, an all-white school where she taught, all-black school, and she lived in our neighborhood, was all black. I mean, but she was very kind to white people, and she did not, but Daddy had lots of white friends. And so they were just around all the time, and there was just I'm going to be nice to just the black people. It's just like I'm going to be nice to human beings. That's just how they did. I do remember, though, after the bombing, women over the mountains, that's what we call the rich white women that live in Birmingham, over the mountain. And they decided, they got with Mama and some of Mama's friends and decided they were going to have teas. And so every other week or so, they would go to each other's homes and sit and have teas so that they could kind of get to know each other as human beings and, learn who each other is like that. And I was telling somebody today that that's what we have to do now. And so if you think about who is your best friend, who was the maid of honor at your wedding, or the matron of honor at your wedding, or the best man, who do you call when you're stressed out and you need to pick up that phone and talk to somebody? Who do you go on a girls' trip with or a guy trip with? You know, who's that intimate friend that you tell all your secrets to? If none of those people are a person of color or a person of your different race, your circle is too small. You need to make an active effort to widen that circle. My circle is so big. Oh my God, I thank God for my circle. I'm here because of my friendship with Rodney Tucker, who's a white man. And he introduced me to Quint today. A few months ago, I was in San Francisco. I spent the night at my friend Gwen Lee, who is Chinese. You know, I have a good friend who's a lawyer, who is Indian. And I wouldn't give up any one of those people, any of that diversity for anything, because it makes my life so much more rich and so much more full.
We have a project here in town that I have to mention right now because it is exactly what you described. It's called the Equity Project. I know I saw a couple of people in the audience. I see Dickie Appleyard back there. I know he's part of that. Julia McQueen started it. But if people are not involved, that is a way to, if you need a more formal environment to kind of push you into having tea, that is certainly a great way to do that. And you can Google that and find out how you can get involved. Did the experience of your family and how they reacted in having tea and continuing to have these conversations, was it different from the other families? Or were you all, and so are you different today, I guess, if they reacted differently?
I don't really know about the other families. I think they may have been more private than we were. You know, we didn't have the luxury of being private. I've given up having anonymity. It's just not going to happen. And that's cool. But Daddy went on to be a public figure. So that also thrust us in the limelight. So we were always there. The press could reach him for an interview when the anniversaries came up or the bombers were convicted or things. And so we didn't see as much of the other people. So I don't really know what the other families' lives were like in that respect.
So you talked about that delayed justice and waiting and wondering, and as a child, just assuming that would happen. We see that playing out in current events right now. So how did that delayed justice for Denise and the girls impact how you view kind of current events right now and the idea that there's often delayed justice if there is justice?
I think it gives me hope for justice. Because I didn't think that we would ever get it, and we did. And so now that we did, I know that there's hope for other people. And I've seen it happen since then. And so it gives me hope that it will happen if everybody just remembers, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, you don't want your relatives to be killed unnecessarily for no reason, and our laws dictated that happens, then that person, no matter who that person is, should be brought to justice. So that's what I believe.
Do you have advice for people who are going through that? There certainly were things that you did that helped bring justice. I know Tia was very involved with Emmett Till as her cousin, I think, right, cousin? And worked hard, is still working hard to bring justice all these years later. What advice do you have for people to keep that hope, but also what can they be doing? What can all of us be doing? It doesn't just have to be, our own family, but to get justice for someone else.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good question. First of all, never give up hope. I have often have people ask me, how do you keep going? How do you keep having hope? Keep energy to do this and do this work? Doesn't it make you sad? Don't you just want to just give up? Well, if you don't have hope, then you don't have anything. I mean, you might as well die. And I was listening to something Steve Harvey said on one of the little Instagram things. He said, if you wake up this morning, God got you here for something. And so, as long as you're here, you need to make that work, But I mean, get involved. Get involved in politics. Get involved in just being a regular human being and a person. You know, if you see some injustice going on in your city, somebody asked me yesterday, who's going to be our new leaders? No, you be your own leader. You know, if our politicians are not doing right, we elect them to go to whatever position they're in. They work for us. We seem to forget that they work for us. We write that check, and we elect them, and they work for us. And if they don't act right, you can send them home. But I think we get all caught up in our daily lives and what we got to do. We got to, you know, take the kids to school. We got to cook dinner. We got to go to work. But we got to add that into our life, watching our politicians, listen to what they vote on. What bills are they putting up now? Do you like that bill? Do you not like that bill? Then you need to go down and tell them. You need to write them. I'm having an issue. They don't want to teach stuff in Birmingham in Alabama. So I went and I pulled up on the internet our senators. And while I was waiting for the plane, I called them all, emailed them all, and text messaged them all. I'm like, no, that's not okay. That's not what we're doing. No. And so you just have to make that part of the stuff that you do every day. I mean, that's a part of who we are as American citizens. It's a part of the freedoms that we have as American citizens that we can't forget to do.
So I'm going to jump ahead then, since you brought that up. So you're familiar with Florida and some things that are going on here. So how do we continue to discuss systemic racism in our public sphere when there's a clear directive from our state government that this information is prohibitive?
I think some people have to just be brave and do what's right. Mama used to always say, right is right and right don't wrong nobody. And sometimes you have to do what's right, even when it's hard, because it's going to be hard. Everything's not easy. And then get on the phone and stalk your public officials. They're really kind of, I don't want to use that word. They're really kind of wimps. If you enough of y'all get on the phone and start calling them and tagging them, they're like, oh, I want to lose my job. They'll turn that stuff around. But we just can't sit, well, I hope it happens. Well, I sure hope it'll happen. And you call your girlfriend and complain. You call this person and complain. No, you need to be actively in there working. Because it's not going to work if you're not actively in there working. Will it work every time? Maybe not. But if you do nothing, nothing is exactly what you're going to get.
So I didn't realize until the presentation that your mom was a school teacher. Mm-hmm. So it struck me as I was looking through some of the questions that we had that, you know, particularly in our schools, they're talking about you can't talk about critical race theory, and the fear of that means you can't talk about history oftentimes. Some people interpret that. So how would she respond, do you think, as a school teacher?
Oh, she'd be mad. Shoo, boy. Y'all don't, you know, I'm not glad she did, but y'all might want to be glad she did right now, because if she came and she would get on the phone and start talking about that, everybody's feelings would be hurt, because she would put you in your place and tell you how wrong that is. And nobody wanted that. No, nobody. She would just speak up. And she would do what she needed to do to help make sure that she was one of those teachers that was in there with her students. She would go to their houses, and sometimes she worked in neighborhoods that, you know, were not necessarily the coolest and the fun neighborhood, but she would go to that child's house, a parent that was a single parent and had 5 or 6 kids and, you know, didn't have the best life. And she would go and she would talk with that child's mother and daddy about their life and about their school. Sometimes she would take clothes when she would go and take food or things that she needed, because she believed in the work that she did as a teacher. She would sacrifice herself to do what is right. You know, she wasn't widely known like my dad, but she had her own, you know, history of being a strong person. When she died, we wanted to make sure that her funeral was a funeral about being a teacher and what was important. A celebration. It was an excellent celebration. And we had 2 of her students that had been students of hers. And one girl's parents was a sharecropper. And they were sharecroppers, so they'd only had like a 2nd grade education. And but they had ended up having like 11 kids. And so Mama had just about all the kids in their class. And so she had this girl. And this girl, because she'd had such a small life, all she wanted to do when she graduated from high school was to meet some nice white people so that she could work in their house, in their kitchen, and clean for them. That was all. And she said that if she really wanted a really good job, she would be a cashier at a gas station. That was as big as her bubble was. It was like this. But Mama taught her the value of education and learning and reading. And not like working in somebody's kitchen was a bad thing, but she should want more. And she went on to go to school, and she went on to go and get a college education, and now she works in a big law firm. She's not a lawyer, but she has a job in a profession. And but also, this is how great teachers can be. Teachers can form people's whole world. Her parents had a second-grade education. So as the kids would come up and learn things at the dinner table, they would go home and take that homework to their mom and dad and teach them at night what they had learned all day so that they could learn what they didn't have an opportunity to do because they were sharecropping as kids. So teachers can make a world of difference. It's a sacrifice.
So you went and talked to Milton High School students today, I believe it was, and I'm sure you've spoke to other classes over the years. Are you seeing anything different in those classrooms today than you did 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago?
Kids are always curious. They're always curious. They want to know things. They want to know what happened in history. They weren't here, so they want to know. And they're still inquisitive and curious and hungry, and they're hungry for truth. So that's what I continue to see.
So not less inclined to ask good questions today?
No.
Good. So how do the racial issues of today compare to the 50s and 60s in your mind?
That's a good question. I think you have some of the same racial issues, but I think they're covered up, and people try to cover them up with a little sugar. But, you dust that off, and it's a nasty donut. And I think we can't pretend like things aren't happening and people aren't saying what they're saying, and you call a thing. So I don't think we can. I think because of what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and I think it's very traumatizing to everybody, and y'all are going to think this is crazy, I think it's good because I think we were asleep and we needed to wake up. And I think we're way more alert now, and we need to stay in the game.
So a question someone had actually written in to ask was if you thought racial equality has improved in the last 2 years.
Oh, no. Let me get back with you on that.
So when President Obama was elected president, many people were really excited to see tangible change in America. Then we had the next presidential election, and many people were disheartened. How could the pendulum swing so far, and what does that say about Americans? And have we, lots of questions, and have we as a whole really not changed at all since the Civil Rights Movement?
I just think there was homework we didn't do. And I think there was underlying hate and racism that we didn't deal with. And when the last president was in office, it reared its ugly head, and people were shocked. They're like, I can't believe it. Like, I don't know why it was there all the time. I don't know why you didn't see it. I saw it, But I think it's some homework that people haven't done. But I'm encouraged because, in Birmingham, when we had our first black mayor, Birmingham was just this big bubble. And then when the black mayor came, we had all this white flight, and white people just scattered and went everywhere. But what happened was it made less white people be in Birmingham, but in the suburbs, there were more white people. But after a while, because the people with the money left, the black people started to go out where the white people were because of the school systems, and the public school systems were better, and everybody wants your child to have a good education. And so you're living next to each other, and everybody in the South, we're really, really polite, And my friends up north and out west think it's BS, the politeness, because a lot of time it ain't real, and that sort of is a little true. But, I think when that happened, things that were buried up under came to life. came to a head, like a zit, you know, and people hadn't dealt with a lot of stuff that we should have dealt with back in the 70s. And so now we're dealing with it. And I think we need to keep dealing with it. I think everybody needs to keep having the dialogue, having the conversations, opening our hearts, realizing that some of the things we thought and things we did were wrong. And we have to, like Dennis, the Dennis story. Dennis grew up one way. You know, I left out the part about Dennis when the mayor changed, the mayor got black in Birmingham, and Dennis was one of the white people that moved to the suburbs. But Dennis didn't have one of the white people that had any money. So he sold his little modest house, and Dennis and his wife and family moved to a trailer park 20 miles outside of town just so they wouldn't have to be near black people. Think about that. So he had to learn, what if he had just stayed and embraced his neighbors, and they'd embrace each other, and they learn about each other, and they learn that we are more alike than we are different. What if so many people had just done that work? Birmingham would be a different place. And I'm sure that type of situation happened all over this country. And that's why we had such a burst of that, because it was a hidden dynamite that it just exploded.
Has your view on racial injustice changed at all as you grew at different ages? Were you at different places, or was it just that your parents raised you to think like you do, and therefore you've always just kind of been this way?
I think I've always been this way. I can't think of, because for me, it was everybody was a human being, and I just, loved everybody. I know it may sound like, oh, that's a nice platitude. But no, it really is true. I mean, because by the time I remember asking my mom specifically, should I hate white people? My dad had this white friend who was a professional photographer that he would shoot and hang out with all the time. He was a state legislator, and we were in Montgomery with his friends all the time. We were in private, predominantly white, private school with, my best friend at the time being a white. So if the answer had been, yes, you should hate white people, that was going to be difficult, because that meant that a good portion of the people that we knew, we now had to start hating. So that was just never an option for us.
What lessons can Pensacola take from Birmingham and how they have changed through the years? What can we do? What are some lessons for us so that we can improve and grow?
Remember the story of the 4 girls. Remember that 4 girls lost their lives not doing anything crazy, but going to church, worshiping the Lord, because people hated them just because they were black. And what that looks like, and how that can cause pain and cause sorrow. There may be stories here like that. I guess I should have done my Pensacola homework, that I didn't look that up before I got down here. But I'm sure there's Pensacola stories of people who suffered loss. And I think we remember that. Remember that this isn't just that's the way I think, or that's the way I believe, or that's the way I vote. This is life or death. And that's important.
What needs to be done to assist in healing the scars that racial violence has left on the victims?
Ooh, that's good too. I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Well, the story of the 5th girl.
Yeah.
You'd think the whole community would embrace. And,
Yeah.
Oh my God, and it was the opposite. It
Yeah.
sounds like in that times. How many since then?
Yeah. I don't know.
What did someone do to you or to your mom, or for you or for your mom or for your dad to help them heal?
The city of Birmingham loves us. They just love us. And they just have always been there. I mean, always shown us love, always embraced us, always been kind. I literally can pick up the phone back home if I've got a problem or anything, and somebody will help me and work with me to get that via black or white. And was just wonderful. I remember when Mama died, people just called and texted, and I mean, for the first 4 days that she died, I had 70 text messages every day I was trying to go through, and phone calls to answer because so many people just wanted to call us love. I've sent over 160 thank you cards for people who brought things, gave things, or just sent a card. But I never forget, like a baby, about second or third day she died, 2 of my friends came over, the older ladies, and they brought gift cards and books of encouragement. And before they could leave, they were black. And then before they left, 3 of my white friends from my church came and brought food and cards. And we all sat and talked. And before they left, they all prayed. And that's just so beautiful to me. It wasn't black people came to me. It wasn't white people came to me. It was everybody came to us to share love with us, to be kind. You know, that's just what it's all about, you know. Everybody's going to lose someone and have some loss, and you want somebody to be there with you. And it really doesn't matter what they look like. But we're there for each other. That's the important thing. And we've got to remember that. Even when it gets crazy and people say crazy stuff, take a step back and like, take a breath, you know. Put your hand on their shoulder and say, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about this. Or, I understand how you feel. But we've got to figure out a way to meet in the middle and show love. That's the only thing I know. I don't know the bigger answer than that. That works for me, so I'm going to keep doing it.
So many people in the audience tonight are here because obviously they care very much about this topic. What are some tools, skills you practice for self-care that you wish to share that would be especially helpful for other activists and educators?
Wow. I'm a Christian, so I pray, and I have the daily devotion every day. It's not a long devotion. It probably should be longer. But I pray every day. I have a Bible that is got 1 million bookmarks in it and highlighters and highlighted, and you know, and when I really get overwhelmed, I go back and dig in the index and find out if I'm sad or if I'm depressed or I think God has left me or is not paying me any attention or I can't get up one more day and just do this. And I feed off of that. You know, I didn't have that, my faith in the Word of God, I wouldn't make it. So I hope everybody else would like to try that. I offer that to you, you know. But whatever you feel that you need to do to help you, but that's what helps me.
What do you want to leave us with tonight? What do you want everyone to walk out of here tonight and do?
Oh, wow. Just love each other. Love that person that you don't like. Be with that person that you don't like. I mean, and that's hard. Because, you know, unlikable people are not hard, but you have to remember something's going on with them. They're upset and they're unhappy because something is unhappy with them. And they might need you to just hug them, bring them some ice cream, and just talk to them and find out what's going on. You know, I have difficult people in my life. At work, the job I used to have, they used to send me the difficult volunteers to talk to because I could talk to them. You know, they would be complaining and whining about something, and then before it was over, they were telling me about their dogs and their kids and that kind of thing. And, you know, I could share with them. Most of the time, those people are hurting deep down, and they don't know how to process that. So love somebody tomorrow. Love somebody today. Talk to somebody who at work gets on your nerves and doesn't think like you think, but try to find something in common that you have with them.
It's a beautiful statement to end on, so I think we're going to end it here. If we could give Lisa a big round of applause.
Thank you. God bless you.
this might be our only standing ovation for doing this 5 years. I'm pretty sure it is. I want to remind everyone, please take the time to fill out your surveys. Please let us know what type of speakers you would like to hear. Please let Lisa know what you thought. That'll help not only us, but that'll help her. And also, please stay and have some cake.